I think race has always been the fault line in American life and American politics. That's not original to me, I think.
Greetings and salutations. This is Dr. Rob here, and today I'm just going to do a brief reaction to Black People We Need to Talk, a video by ThisBahamianGyal. I believe her name was Rogan. She did this relatively short video talking about some issues of accountability in the Black community. So I wanted to take a look at that and offer some commentary and reflection.
In particular, because that word racism is being so overused that society is becoming desensitized to it, and we actually can't even recognize it when it actually exists. We think,
okay, this is a red flag, definitely. Anytime someone opens a video with Candace Owens, that's the conservative red flag. So I'm not sure if that's her political leaning or if that's just the provocative introduction she's trying to use.
Nothing about slavery. Nothing. So the equivocal number from the 1860s for 40 acres today is 200 million.
Okay, this seems to be some kind of reparations hearing. California has been a central location for some reparations hearings at the state level, that topic being debated. So I'm not sure where she's going with this second.
The first time I was called an Oreo was in middle school. She said, "Oh, you're such an Oreo. Like, you act white, you listen to white people music." It seems like if you act too Black, then you won't fit in with the white kids or the other kids that aren't Black. And if you aren't Black enough, then the Black kids don't see you as Black.
Okay, now this next one seems to be some type of identity discussion in terms of the Black person feeling awkward in two worlds, more or less, almost like a double consciousness. Too Black to be around white folk, but too white to be around Black folk, that kind of thing, which is another topic. So this is an interesting strategy in terms of her introduction.
So I tend to get into heated debates with family members, friends, even perfect strangers when I talk about accountability in the Black community or the lack thereof. What I encounter often is a lot of entitlement and excuses, but not a whole lot of introspection. I want to start with the blame game that a lot of people tend to play. I don't have a lot of patience for complainers. I don't like people who are complaining and blaming people for the position that they're in. There are so many people in our community who do not believe in personal responsibility. It's always somebody else's fault. If they're in a bad state, they never look in the mirror. They never get introspective and question what role they played in the position that they're currently in. I cannot tell you how many times I hear people saying that it was mommy's fault, or it was daddy's fault, or it was the environment's fault. And yes, those things do have some bearing in your life. They do, but you cannot reach the age of being in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s and beyond and still blaming somebody else for the predicament that you're in.
Now, she seems to be making a lot of generalizations. I'm curious about who in particular she's talking about. I know she has some anecdotal references in terms of family debates, things of this nature, but this whole blame game and a lack of accountability, I'm curious about specifically who she's talking about.
School, and he has a family to take care of. That's what you do. We in the Black community are not unique in our struggles. Oh, let me tell you something. I can hear the critics now. Oh, but Hispanic people weren't slaves. White people weren't slaves. Were you? I've never picked cotton. I've never worked in a field. I've never been sold on a slave auction. I've never been beaten, not even by my parents. We do not have the same experience that many of our ancestors had, and thank God for that. So why am I still using slavery as a crutch, blaming slavery for my lack of progress? It's a sentiment that I hear often from my Black brothers and sisters, and I think many of them forget that we are the result of our choices.
Okay, I see where this is going. She seems to be making a lot of generalizations and pulling on a certain number of talking points, particularly with the emphasis on accountability and personal responsibility that's often associated with modern Republicans. I don't know if this lady's Republican or not, but she's starting to sound like one, because I don't know about anyone that's serious about the Black community that does not engage in a holistic critique. Nobody gives the Black community a carte blanche pass for their activities, and just because you point to some structural or historical dynamics does not mean you exclude or eliminate the role of personal agency or group agency.
From the other activists. And the crazy thing is, there were people online condemning Walmart for pulling out. Oh, Walmart deserved this because what? Walmart is here to run a business, okay? And when the community no longer serves that business, they will leave. Bye-bye. And then I think about the mayhem back in Chicago in April. You have people like Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson pandering to these folks and saying, while it's unacceptable, it's not constructive to demonize young people who have been starved of opportunities. Really?
I had to add an addendum to this initial reflection after looking at some of the information online regarding this incident. Now, not only did she not say his whole quote, I believe that she's not capturing the context that a lot of black politicians frequently talk about in terms of comprehensive solutions. Now, his specific statement was, in no way do I condone the destructive activity we saw in the Loop and Lakefront this weekend. It is unacceptable and has no place in our city. However, it is not constructive to demonize youth who have otherwise been starved of opportunities in their own communities. Our city must work together to create spaces for youth to gather safely and responsibly under adult guidance and supervision to ensure that every part of our city remains welcome for both residents and visitors. This is one aspect of my comprehensive approach to improve public safety and make Chicago livable for everyone. Now, the other aspect of this dynamic that I came across was that Rutgers published a story noting that some of the clips that had been inaccurately tagged covering this, and some of the clips were actually from older footage, and also led to more or less exaggerated coverage of the incident within itself. I'm gonna post a screenshot or a link to the story itself. So, how this story was interpreted is a big part, in my view, how people are seeing this situation. And the reason why I wanted to highlight this is that one byproduct, and this ties over to some other video that I'm working on talking about crime. Frequently, African American politicians have been caught up in this whole crime discussion, whether Democrat or Republican, specifically Democrats responding to Republican rhetoric frequently. And the solution that African American elected officials have pushed has been a comprehensive approach. Unfortunately, because of structural dynamics that they cannot control, the only aspect that has been brought from these dynamics has been the focus on more cops and more prisons. Although they frequently advocate for what one politician labeled all of the above. We want community-based solutions. We want more opportunities for young people to work and things of that nature, because many of them understand that when you start talking about crime, there are multitude of factors that go into this. Now, in no way am I trying to excuse any type of behavior of that nature. However, I am highlighting that locking more people up and more cops is not the solution to solving America's crime problem. And that seems to be something that now, I'm not saying she wants, but when you just say, oh, the hell with it, these are just some young people acting up, you're suggesting that you just want to lock up more black people and build more prisons. And that's where we get into the problems that emerged during the 90s with both Clinton and Biden when he was a senator, and in the 1980s with some of the legislation proposed as it had to do with 3 strikes in this nature. So it's important to recognize some of the subtleties in this discussion. And unfortunately, I think that she falls victim to a little of both bad coverage, and I think that she is too willing to go with the easy solution, lock them up, more cops, more jails. So I think this is an important side note to mention on this situation that happened in Chicago back in April.
Fact of the matter is, you don't have a lot of people who will step outside of their communities. They won't step outside of their comfort zones to see how the other side lives. They just won't do it. And I think that is limiting them as far as their exposure, as far as their experiences.
Okay, so one of the main issues I have with Rogan's analysis is that she articulates a very monolithic conceptualization of black people. I'll give 3 examples that of popular YouTubers as an example. First, we have Andre the Black Nerd. Andre the Black Nerd does sci-fi movie and TV reviews as well as game and anime reviews. He has approximately 800,000 subscribers, a little under 800,000 subscribers on YouTube. The next example I'll talk about is Marquise, or point to, is Marquise Brownlee. He's probably the leading tech reviewer on YouTube with almost 18 million subscribers. He does phone reviews as well as electric vehicle reviews. And next is musical or cultural reference. We can talk about Odd Future, who gave us Tyler Creator, Sid the Kid, as well as Frank Ocean. This was a collective of musicians that came out in the late 2000s and have gone on to have a significant impact on the music community. And Tyler Creator has won multiple Grammys at this point. So, as I said before, one of the main issues that I have with Rogan's conceptualization is that she articulates a monolithic view of blackness that does not represent diverse manifestations that we have historically and today. And I think this is an era to go down this path. So with these three examples, we see the diversity of blackness, not only class, but culturally. So this is something to keep in mind, that we are not monolithic, and the whole Oreo reference in 2023, I think, is a little outdated.
In 2008, when Reverend Jesse Jackson was caught on a hot mic criticizing Barack Obama, for talking down to the black community. Jackson was mad because Obama was asking black people to take more responsibility for the state that they're in.
I think race has always been the fault line in American life and American politics. That's not original to me. I think any observer of America would say that. And by the way, that historically has not sort of been a one-sided partisan issue. My favorite president, Abraham Lincoln, did an awful lot to advance the cause of freedom, and conversely, the Democratic Party was where the Dixiecrats resisted civil rights and progress for years and imposed Jim Crow. So it is something that America has had to grapple with for centuries.
Okay, I do not think Rogan is engaging in malicious activity. However, this slight complexity that presented by former President Obama is something that needs to be noted in this discussion. He was a very skilled politician that knew when and how to employ race, and there was tension between him and the quote-unquote old guard, not only on tactics, but I personally feel that there might have been some animosity between Jesse Jackson and former President Obama, simply because of their past histories with Jesse Jackson running for president and the path that former President Obama had. Nevertheless, this clip highlights the complexity involved in this, because it's important to keep in mind that you can speak about both holding accountability of the structural inequalities based on race in America and talk about what's needed on an individual and communal level in terms of self-determination and moving forward to improving the lives of black men and black women. So although I think that she's going a little heavy on the generalization, I think in this, as this clip points out, even the former president is aware of the deep dynamic that race plays in the American political system and the fault line that have served historically in terms of race being a key dividing factor between the Democrats and Republicans in the United States, and has existed this way for more than a century, particularly if we look at the last alignment being in the late 1930s going into the 1960s, with support by black folks aligning themselves with the Democratic Party. And this was not just on accident. This was based on policy. Although it's not ideal, and this is a topic that I've spoken about elsewhere, the reality is that one party has put more substance on the table than the other. Yes, it is a situation of the lesser of two evils. Nevertheless, it's clear that one has been more sympathetic to the issues or concerns of black folk, even in an imperfect sense, than the other. So this clip just highlights this dynamic, with the former president highlighting that race is still salient as a component in our contemporary discussions of politics. So that's just something to keep in mind in terms of her notion of how race is used and how she wanted to use the former president as an example. Overall, I don't know if Rogan is quote unquote on the payroll or not, meaning whether or not she's leaning towards the conservative side. I don't think she's an extreme example, to say the least. She seems to be empathetic and coming from a place of genuine authenticity. However, her references to slavery, the behavior of black folk, and lack of accountability, as well as this notion of black people not being a diverse population, and this notion of reference to Oreos, I think is inaccurate. The clip that she posted in reference to slavery was brought from a reparations discussion. A reparations discussion is totally legitimate. As I've said many times before, or has been mentioned by other commentators. Why is it that when black folks start talking about these issues, it was a problem? However, when the Jewish community of another group talks about issues of reparations, it's a no-no. At no point in time should any group or any culture be ashamed of talking about the injustices that have been committed against us. In the same light, we can talk about the ills of slavery without getting caught up on what harpers us today. I think when people reference slavery as a reference point, they're talking about how it contributed to structural racism, structural institutional barriers that are persistent today, and that can be a topic of a whole nother discussion. In terms of the accountability, I disagree in terms of her assertion. There are several organizations within the black community, and there have been several leaders within the black community that have pushed forward to try to help us as a whole in an individual level. So I don't think that's accurate at all. And also, I think she presents a very monolithic view or generalization of black folks. This notion that we don't have a diverse culture is inaccurate, to say the least. In every sense of society, there's different types of black folks, whether you talk about this in a class sense, whether you talk about this artistic sense or stylistic sense. So I think that's inaccurate. So I don't know what the objective is, and like I said, I don't know if she's on a payroll. And as I've said before, being on a payroll as a black conservative plays well. So I can't knock the hustle if that's the path that she's on. More power to you on the individual. As they say, get the bag. However, the claims that they make are ludicrous, and I'm more than welcome to dissect anytime people make these false claims, because they're not based on facts. And as I pointed out, they cherry-picked a lot of things that they try to highlight that are issues within the black community or how politicians respond to them. Nevertheless, overall, it was enjoyable watching Rogan's video, The Bahamian Girl. And I thank you for watching this reflection and commentary. Please watch, subscribe, like, and subscribe and share. Thank you.